I have a guest with us this morning. This is part of an ongoing series we've been doing with veterans issues on Monday mornings to start off each month over the course of the last several months. It's about 5 minutes after 9 o'clock, and 78 now, on our way perhaps again to triple digits before the day is over. And Bill Colley with you on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Catherine McLeod joining us this morning. First of all, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
I was going to say we were just talking about Scottish clans, and McLeods are like McDonald's and Douglas's and huge, huge clan.
There's a lot of us. Not so many in the Idaho Treasure Valley area, but yes.
Yeah, but you get around the world. In fact, Dennis Weaver used to play a character called McLeod on television when I was a kid, and he would ride a horse through New York City chasing down criminals.
I don't do that.
Yeah, I think that would be a little dangerous with the traffic today. We wanted to mention, too, your actual title is Reserve Component Transition Assistance Advisor Program, or at least that's what you do, right? And you're the advisor in that.
Correct.
I had a boss years ago, and he had actually worked psychological operations in Vietnam, and he said people's titles and what they do happen to be important because they worked hard for it.
I feel like I'm earning this one every day. Every day's a new adventure, but it's always great, never boring.
And you've had some time yourself in uniform.
Correct. I'm actually still currently serving. Been in 22 years this past July. I've been in the Idaho Air Guard for over 22 years. And then the last 2 years I worked for the state of Idaho for the Army as well. And now I get to help both services with this opportunity. So.
Are there similarities because you're working with people who are transitioning sometimes between coming home after maybe 20 years and retiring? I talked to a fellow, good golly, a few months ago at the grocery store, and he told me that he had a son, I think, who had done 17 deployments over the course of the last 20 years. So these people they've gotten used to, well, if you can ever get used to it, they've gotten used to a lot of disruptions in their lives. But still, it's not easy. And I imagine that you have to deal with a lot of their needs and to make sure that they keep an even keel.
Well, and that's the interesting part about this position is it gives me an opportunity to see what service members and their families are needing and meet them where they are, because you're absolutely right. It's one of those things that transition could be as simple as transitioning from the military workforce to the civilian workforce. Some of them went into the military and put off their education, and then they want to go into education. Could be retirement. It could be medical retirement earlier than they had hoped. So it's really broad, and we don't eliminate any service branch or personnel, and we try to encompass anyone that really needs benefits or entitlements. So it's pretty broad.
You referenced families. Prior to the first Gulf War, I can remember hearing that there was not a lot of support for families. And about that time in 1990, there was a real recognition that came along that we actually had to, work with families, keep tabs on them because, somebody goes off and we don't know how long they're going to be there. That war did not come with a known expiration date, right? We didn't know it wasn't long, but we just didn't know. So you have people who are back home and maybe they've never made the mortgage payment. Maybe that's what the spouse has done before the spouse left. They have all of these things that suddenly are in their laps that they've never done before.
And that's very true in all those instances. There's always a pre, a during, and a post. So whether it's prior to enlisting, we try to prepare families and service members while they're in and when they're gone, because the families are really a huge proponent to support that service member so they can perform the mission. But mostly our goal is to focus on the benefits and entitlements that the veterans themselves earn. A lot of times, though, that secondary and tertiary effect is the family. So we try to encompass all of that.
It's a great change because in the late 1970s, I was just getting out of high school, and one of my neighbors, he was a couple of years older than me, he had joined the Navy. And I was working a part-time job to earn some money for college, and his wife worked at the place where I worked. And she was telling me one day in the cafeteria, she said, that the policy of the Navy at the time seemed to be that if we wanted you to have a wife, we would have issued you one.
Yes, I've heard that many times.
So what changed to really, because we've got 180 degrees from there.
Yeah, and interesting you should say that. So this program actually became a entity and a benefit to service members starting in 2005, which this current war that we're in started in 2003, really, and then General Blau which created a working group in Congress and helped write this into Congress. So this position was created in 2005, and it was actually legally mandated in each state as of 2010, because what they found is exactly what you're referring to. As service members would go off, the military is really good at training them on how to do their job, their mission, all of those things, but then there were all these other benefits that came as a benefit of their service, and they didn't know how to navigate those. So what I do and what this program tries to do, and there's 3 of us throughout the state, but I really focus on the southern Idaho and eastern Idaho, and I live in the Treasure Valley, is we try to gain a breadth of information on all of the categories, and then we partner with community organizations and do community outreach. So I was listening to you earlier talking to the commissioner, and I try to meet once a month with Commissioner Renke, runs the joining forces out here, and really we try to get good relationships formed so that when service members need something, they usually don't know. They're pretty stubborn and resilient, and they don't tend to ask for a lot. So that's one thing that I've gotten really good at, is asking questions to try to figure out what they may need, because a lot of times they don't even realize that these services are out there for them. But I also have to have a really good working relationship with community organizations so that I can tell them that these organizations are out here and be involved. And it's that personal relationship that really seems to help.
You mentioned this. My dad claims he did not know the GI Bill until he was nearly 40. So he did, at the age late 30s, he decided to go back to college and start getting some coursework done. We had been on vacation in Washington. We were at the Smithsonian. He saw a brochure about the GI Bill, picked it up and started to read it. And he claimed nobody ever told him about it at discharge. Now, my belief is they probably did tell him about it, but a lot of people are in a rush to get home. You're excited about the
Yes.
discharge. You're not necessarily listening to people explain the GI Bill to you. And so these are the types of things I think sometimes that people miss out on. And when they get back, it's good to inform them about what's available.
You are absolutely right. I think that most of the best connections that I make are not when they're being held to that unit briefing, right? Because absolutely, they want to get out. They don't know that they need it, or they think that they don't need it. The other truth is, I do hear that a lot too. Nobody told me about this. So we try to make sure that we're available to service members when they may have an opportunity to listen or they're willing to listen. But the other difficult thing is that every year laws and rules change. So the GI Bill that maybe he would have been eligible for, he may not have been eligible at the time. And so to him, he discounted it and he didn't remember it. But every year, the laws change, the rules change, the VA benefits, the education benefits, everything changes. So we try to keep up on that, because as a service member, that's not something that you typically have time or energy to do. And that's been a passion of mine, is teaching individuals and helping them find those resources.
I had a friend many, many years ago who, after 6 years, he got his discharge and went to college, got a teaching degree, got a job teaching in North Carolina, and then suddenly realized his transition was very difficult. So he re-upped and did another 14 to get his military retirement, and then did that instead, because he never felt comfortable in that civilian life, especially for some reason teaching at a school. It just, what he had, it was so different than what his experience had been in uniform. And I think sometimes a lot of people are still struggling with that adjustment. And it went on for years before he finally decided. I mean, 4 years of college and then teaching for a few years before he decided to go back in.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because actually my background is education as well. So I was a elementary school teacher for over 10 years and just jumped back into the full-time military sector, because there's a community that you build and the relationships are great, but we all have different experiences. I still love the classroom. I wish that I could work 2 full-time jobs, but unfortunately there's just not enough time in the day. But yeah, we all have our different experiences, and that's part of one of the things that this program does, and I'm grateful for, is we want people to feel comfortable in the civilian sector, but we aren't discounting or taking away from their military group. So we're trying to blend those two.
Well, I had a great uncle who came back from the Second World War, and he ended up self-medicating the rest of his life. He'd been a medic through North Africa and then, through Europe and the like. And he came back home. They basically put them on a boat. They sailed them back Long rides on a boat, by the way. It's different than coming back on a plane now today. Got back and he, went back into a business that he'd been working on before he ended up getting drafted. And there was really nowhere for him to go. But I still think sometimes people are coming back today, and a lot of them are hesitant about coming and finding what they need.
It's that reaching out piece that's challenging, and that's why I try to reach out to individuals. So grocery stores, wherever I see them, we have great conversations, just keeping track of them. But there are so many different organizations now, a lot of nonprofits that help service members with that. They can help them start businesses. They can help them um, with home loans or getting back into different things. You talked about self-medicating, so the VA and all other different resources that aren't necessarily associated, because sometimes service members may have a difficult experience, so they may not want to reach out to any more services within the military, but there are so many that support veterans that are outside of the military and state branch that individuals can get help for whatever they may need.
Now, you primarily service just people in Twin Falls County, right? Or are
Well,
you
the
regional?
South and East Idaho. So really anywhere in
Wow,
this eastern, and then like I said, I
you're
live
on
in
the
the
road a
Treasure
lot.
Valley. I am. I try to come out East Idaho at least once a month, but I'll likely be out here this weekend as well because at the Armory here in Twin Falls by CSI, we have a family day. So really whenever I'm invited, I'm here.
But it's such a vast territory and so many people to work with.
You're absolutely right. That's the challenge. So that's why I'm hoping that you can get the word out and people can let me know what's going on because if I don't know about it, I can't be there. And I hope to be able to get people help where they're at.
Do you get those crisis calls?
Do I get them? What do you mean?
People who are almost at the end of their rope. Do you get those from time to time?
I personally have received those, yes. But again, I work as like a referral resource. So I try not to take that on because I'm not a trained professional. But if I've formed a good relationship with an individual, I then know how to get them to the right people.
But a lot of time they've already been through that and they see you afterward.
That's true. That's true. I can either see them before because a lot of times when they come to me, there's a litany of issues that they're navigating, whether it's
Sure.
financial or home or family life. But and sometimes it does lead down that road.
For people who do need to get in touch with you,
Mhm.
do they do it by web? I mean, how does that work?
Honestly, I think the best idea is usually email. The we have a website though for our work, but really email is the best to get to me individually.
I was going to say, what's the email address? Because I have it here, but our listeners
Yes.
can't see it.
Yeah, so it's K McLeod, MCCLOUD, like Mick and Cloud, and then it's at GAPSI, so GAPSI.com.
And technically, again, what is your title?
It's Reserve Component Transition Assistance Advisor. So it's a huge word, but in the military we love acronyms, so RCTAA.
Is the work going to start slowing down because of we're not in Afghanistan any longer, and we've pretty much just want to have a small force in Iraq?
Oh, absolutely not. No,
Really?
it's actually picking up. We've got service members that are deployed right now and some that are going out the door here in the near future and then those that are coming back. So it's really a spin up, spin down and it's always moving. Service members always need support regardless of their deployment status.
And they need the support sometimes 6 weeks after coming home, and sometimes years after coming home.
Oh, absolutely. I've worked with service members that have been out of the service for 15, 20, 25 years, and even those that they're trying to pass benefits and entitlements to their children, like you said about your father, and I can help them get their children the services and benefits. A lot of times it's when service members will pass away too, and they may have been in World War II and serving, and it's getting them in touch with the cemeteries and individuals to get them the services or the funeral honors that they want. It's really a lot of things. Every day's different.
We've got more on the way. By the way, Catherine McLeod joining us. She's here until 9:30. It's almost 20 minutes after the hour, 9 o'clock, and we're still holding steady at 79 degrees. Bill Colley 2 on Magic Valley this morning. On News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Just a couple of quick programming reminders. Coming up Thursday morning, we've got Fish and Game between 7 and 8 o'clock, Idaho State Police at 8:30, and at 9 o'clock, Pastors Roundtable. Catherine McLeod joining us this morning, and we're talking about some veterans issues on Magic Valley this morning on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. And Bill Colley with you, and I'm here until 10 a.m. And then, of course, after the news at 10 o'clock, Dan Bongino comes along. You mentioned that the need is probably going to continue to grow. Actually, with all these people coming home now, and a lot of them settling back down into a civilian lifestyle, and you mentioned this can go on for years and years and years. You referenced burials, for instance, because we now have the new National Cemetery here in Twin Falls County. So you have a number of people, I'm going to guess, who are, because it's the only national cemetery for about 3 states. I think the other one's way over in Oregon somewhere on the other side of the state. Do a lot of those people come to see you? Do their families come to see you in those instances?
They can. It really depends on what the service member and the families want. So there's the Veteran Cemetery and the Eagle area in Pocatello, and it depends on if the service member qualifies to be buried there. So there are so many questions that we have to ask to get to the right answer. But then if service members are interested in that, absolutely they can contact me and I can get them in touch with the right resource to pursue what that individual would like.
There's got to be some people you work with, though, too, who actually become mentors for other folks who are coming home, because they've gotten home and they've managed to, I don't want to say ace everything, but they've gotten everything together. And sometimes this used to happen at the Legion or the VFW. They don't see the membership they used to, but someone could join and go in, and there'd be someone from the previous ward say, "Let me help you out." But you probably still have a handful of people who are almost like a volunteer staff willing to step in and take that role on.
Yeah, and actually that's kind of how I started in this position, was informally. And that's something that the military does really well, is with their rank structure, is they create a mentorship. So those individuals that have been in 10, 15, 20 years that have done A, B, and C, they see the new individuals going through it, and a lot of time it's very informal. They build a relationship and they try to help that individual and their family through those troubled times.
Not to get too personal, but your rank is what?
I'm a master sergeant, so
Okay.
an E7.
And my dad made staff sergeant, but that was about as best as he could ever do. But that was Army, Air
There's
Force.
a lot
Obviously.
of things that are rank dependent for sure.
But again, you're working with soldiers as well as airmen. And I would imagine, too, sometimes that because of the differences in the service, I mean, obviously there are a lot of things that are similar, but there are differences that, you have to be aware of all of that, too, as you're working with people, because it was done differently there than maybe it was done in the Air Force.
True. There's a little bit of a different language, but ultimately the goal is the same. We've all been through similar instances. A lot of the bases are joint bases. There's a lot more of a mission focus because we're working regularly together. All branches work together, and service members just may or may not see it. In my first 10 years out in the Air Guard, I really wasn't working with the Army as much, and this has given me a good opportunity to work with them because we were right across the street from each other and we'd see each other. The uniforms are almost the same, but they give a little bit different titles, a little bit different camaraderie, but we really partner well.
You mentioned the joint bases, too, and that came about because of the Base Closing Commission in the 90s, right? The idea was, but you ended up, so Joint Base Andrews, I grew up calling it Andrews Air Force Base. I used to drive by there a lot. I worked with the dog rescue, and I would drive right by the base on the highway. But when that became Joint Base, it took me about 5 years to be able to get rid of the old name and come in with a new name. But these are changes where probably in the long run, the better, because you get some sort of cohesion between the different branches.
Very true. I think that by building that partnership, we understand each other's missions a little bit more, and there's still always a lot of joking, but I think it's all in good fun, and we all enjoy working together usually.
There's still going to always be that bond that I think exists for anyone who actually wore the uniform, no matter what branch they happen to be in.
True, and there's a lot of service members that change branches. They start in one, and then they realize that may not be for them anymore, and they go to another one.
One of my former coworkers, after 4 years of the Air Force, left and did 17 in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Because," he said, "somebody told me that they had better parties in the Navy." And I said, "Was that true?" He said, "No, I was misinformed."
I hear that quite a bit from people, too. Misinformation.
But he absolutely loved the work. The Navy put him to work at the Navy television station. and he spent the remainder of that 15 out of those 17 years with a camera or in front of a camera, and it helped him do a transition into television broadcasting after he was finally discharged. So the skills you learn,
True.
and you don't have to go several $100,000 into debt to do it.
Absolutely. And the options to go part-time too. So there's full-time enlistments, there's full-time jobs, and then there's the guard and the reserves, so they can do a little bit of both. And it's interesting that people can have completely different jobs in both sectors.
A little under a minute to go. Anything people should we didn't bring up that you wanted to maybe share?
Really, I just hope that people reach out. Let me know when you have events happening that I can come to. I'm not soliciting. I'm just trying to inform people, but I'm always happy to come help. So if they can reach out and let me know when those events are going on, I'm more than happy to be there.
Want to thank you for coming by today.
Great, thank you.
Had to be a big trip for you if you're coming from the Treasure Valley.
No, I love it. I was up here just earlier last week, so
Okay, yeah, and at $5 a gallon, what the heck?
we won't talk about that.
I want to thank Catherine McLeod for joining us this morning. It's almost 9:30. We've got a short break. And Cal Thomas morning commentary coming up in about 10 minutes. We're up to 82 on Magic Valley this morning with Bill Colley on News Radio 96.1 FM, 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com.